Hi, everybody. We are live on Facebook. My name is Hillary Hightower. I am the Director of Training and Outreach at Denton County Friends of the Family. I would like to welcome you to the August community conversation, which is the impact of domestic and sexual violence on children. We have four of the best experts in the state, honestly, on this issue here with us today. And so I'm going to just panelists introduce you all as the order that I see you on my screen. So first I see Pallavi Baisiat. Pallavi, if you'll wave, thank you. Pallavi graduated with a Master of Science in Counseling from the University of North Texas in 2014 and has been with Denton County Friends of the Family since that time. She did her internship as a child and adolescent counselor and has worked as a counselor for our Battering Intervention and Prevention program. Currently, she is a children's advocate and counselor for our transitional housing program and our emergency shelter. Pallavi provides play therapy and activity therapy. She is passionate about working with kids and with the families impacted by sexual assault and domestic violence. Next, I see Anita. So Anita Montagna is a licensed professional counselor serving as a bilingual student assistance counselor at Calhoun Middle School. Anita's training and experience originated through working with families and children who have experienced domestic and sexual violence. Her role in the district is to advocate for students' mental health and aid in their learning process through the benefits of social emotional learning. Anita provides resources and support to educators and students in efforts to build community relationships and restorative movements to help create a stronger team every day. And for those listening, I didn't say Calhoun Middle School is in Denton ISD. And then next, I see Kara Goodman. Kara is also a licensed professional counselor and a national certified counselor. She currently serves as a student assistance counselor at Evers Park Elementary in Denton ISD. And her kiddos that she works with are ages 5 to 11. Previously, she worked as a child and adolescent counselor, as well as a Battering Intervention and Prevention program counselor at Denton County Friends of the Family. Kara holds a master's degree in counseling and development from Texas Women's University. And last, but certainly not least, Priscilla. Priscilla Bach joined our Friends of the Family team in January of this year as a child and adolescent counselor. In this role, she primarily provides therapeutic services to children ages 3 to 17 and their families. Before coming to our agency, Priscilla attended the University of Texas at Tyler and completed a Master's of Arts in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. As a master's student, Priscilla completed her counseling internship in a school district and provided counseling to elementary school students. Priscilla is a licensed professional counselor associate in the state of Texas and a national certified counselor. Priscilla is also working to complete additional training and experience to pursue a registered play therapist certification. Thank you to my experts for being here with me today. I'm so grateful. I know just what all of you wanted to be doing is right, 2 weeks into school is doing a webinar with me, but I am so grateful and appreciative of your help in doing this. And really today, just want to talk about the impacts of domestic and sexual violence on kids. So again, thank y'all for joining me. Can each of you share some nuggets about what are some of the impacts that we see of domestic and sexual violence on kids?
I can go first. So the impact on the kids are sometimes you'll see there's a lot of guilt, a lot of self-blame, unstable housing. Sometimes there's a fear of like hopelessness, powerlessness, fear of being alone. That might just be like some of the things that I can count, but there's many more.
Sure. And sometimes with younger kiddos, we might see maybe regressions in behavior that they had already typically mastered, like potty training, things like that. With older kiddos, we might even see, like Pallavi talked about, lower self-esteem, maybe acting out in the classroom, sometimes aggression. It really can vary from family to family in every kiddo.
I can chime in. A lot of the things that I typically notice are with a lot of our kiddos, they'll have like somatic symptoms, or they'll complain like about like their tummy hurting or their head hurting, when really it's kind of the root of it is anxiety, or sometimes even depression, as a result of some of the things going on in the home.
I think also we all mentioned all the things that I was going to say, but additionally to all those things, it's just so complex and so complicated, because sometimes they show these symptoms and they don't know where it's stemming from, and it might be stemming from 2 weeks ago, years ago, and so it's really hard to unpack all the feelings and all even those physical symptoms that they're experiencing, because it's been so internalized and so closeted.
I think one of the things I notice in the theme of each of what you said is that just as with our adult clients, trauma shows up differently in each child and each adolescent. And so, you know, Priscilla mentioned the regression, sort of that moving backwards of things we had already accomplished. And sometimes I know kids kind of internalize and go inward after experiencing these things. And then one of you also mentioned aggression, which sometimes kids go outward with the things that they've experienced. Kara and Anita specifically, as folks who are working currently in schools, and I know you're also working with different age groups too, which is great for the folks listening. How do you most often see the impacts of domestic or sexual violence show up in students while in the school setting?
I can go first. Our kiddos from secondary, so we got 6th graders to 8th graders. It shows in lots of different symptoms, symptoms of the problem. The problem would be the abuse possibly, but the symptoms are the problem behaviors that we see in the classroom, which usually that's what gets all the attention. The distractions, the attention seeking behaviors, they either acting out and creating a lot of different scenarios within their classroom, and that can vary from each period that they transition, and they have 8 transitions in a day, and so it is a lot, but poor grades is usually what we see. Poor grades, the lack of motivation, the lack of desire to even do better, and the challenges in emotional regulation. Lots of sometimes aggression, sometimes lots of crying spells, and every day could look different for that same child.
Yeah, and we see many of those things at the elementary level too. Meltdowns, children, who seemingly nothing has happened, but it could have just been something that triggered some anxiety or fear in them, and all of a sudden, they're melting down in the hallway, or maybe, we have kiddos, I notice, who don't get, if they're coming from a situation with domestic violence, aren't getting enough sleep. And so they are more irritable during the day, just because we all are irritable when we don't get enough sleep. And so we also, like Priscilla was saying, again, at the elementary level, we see those regressions, accidents at school, and things like that.
Thank you both for kind of giving us some insights into what that looks like. So Pallavi and Priscilla, as therapists who work with clients at Friends the Family, I know that your clients, or maybe your clients' parents, share with you how those impacts show up at school. Do those things look a little different from your perspective than Kara and Anita just shared?
I would say mostly the same. And then I've also heard parents say that he gets in trouble in school at all times. He's such a difficult child. He always hits the sister, or the sibling fights are more aggressive than a normal one. I hear from a parent a lot more like a difficult child, quote unquote, a difficult child. So it's almost like targeting behaviors and not actually a problem. So problem may not be the child itself, but then it's, I think, the way it's presented when we do the parent consult. I look at the poor grades. Absolutely, that can be one of it. Sometimes parents have hard time understanding why things are so different now. And then we go backtrack and look at is, was there a change in environment? I do work at an emergency shelter, so I do see a lot often of those. So the child has changed the school district maybe 5 times in a year. That's a lot of change for a 6-year-old. And sometimes it comes as an aggression because I would like to protect myself, and that it comes an aggression for a 7-year-old. So I think a lot of those has been presented as a behavior problem and not exactly directly related to, they don't see as because the impact of domestic violence, and all they're asking most likely child is help.
Like Paula V said, we do regular parent consultations throughout the therapy process, and we're checking in about behaviors across like different contexts. So what's showing up at home, what's showing up at school. So similarly, they talk a lot about these surface things that we might notice in the classroom, like maybe not following directions or having difficulty interacting with peers. Something I'm also usually curious about understanding from the parent is like social connection. Are they able to make friends at school? Are they able to feel like they have at least one close friend, or how do they interact with other adults? Because those are, you know, important protective factors. I know we're going to talk about that later too, but yeah, so I think very similar to Paula V, we kind of go off of parent report of what's going on, and sometimes we do talk with teachers or other school staff if it's requested by the parent.
Well, you led me right into my next question for you and Paula V, which is, in your work at Friends the Family, do y'all work with the kids' counselors or their teachers or the administration at the school? And if so, can you walk us through what that process entails?
So since working at our emergency shelter, sometimes the family comes with absolutely nothing. They may not have even the backpack. That sometimes seems so simple, but they may not have it. So while there are, so my role is not only the counselor, but also children's advocate. So what I do is help the client connected with the school districts that might be working with the social work. So once we identify the school district, and I definitely work closely with Anita because Camplin Middle School is our zone school. So that way I'm able to help the child register for the school. Also prepping when is the first day of the school. If the parent requested, if the parent gives me the release to talk to the counselor, I would definitely do that. Sometimes they're not ready, so it kind of becomes a little challenging. But if they're ready, then I'll just let them know, like, hey, this is our shelter kiddo. This is going to be the first day in the school, and the first day may not be the first day the actual school started. The first day may be sometime in March, so it might look a little different. So I think working with the school staff, administrative staff, connecting them with the resources, school nurse, is the immunization up to date? Do they get all this immunization within a 30 day of time that they are given? If there's any presenting problem and they're receiving services with the counselor at the school, is parents allowing me to talk to the counselor? If so, how much information can we share? Because I feel like even though we have all different roles, our goal is to provide for the best interest for this child.
Pallavi or Priscilla, when you all talk to the schools or the counselors or the teachers, do you, I know you probably get a release from the child's parents in order to do that because of confidentiality. Do you renew those every so often? Are they good for the whole school year? What does that look like?
And typically our ROIs or releases of information only go up to 90 days. So it's about 3 months. And we can always talk to parents about renewing that and continuing to be able to communicate with school staff. And so from my experience, my role looks a little bit different than Pallavi, but I've interacted with teachers and just understanding, especially if this main concern the parent has is in the classroom of, well, the teacher is there all day long. They're able to see what's going on. Like, are there certain triggers that are causing maybe a behavior? Discussing strategies or different ways of maybe interacting with the problem, like what ways they've tried, what ways work best. And something we can use with parents is CPRT, or child parent relationship therapy. And there are models with teachers. And basically the goal of that is just to focus on the relationship between the teacher and the child, and not focusing on the problem or what's missing, but all the parts that are going really well between them.
So this question is for all of you. I think some obvious good allies for kids who have experienced these things are like the counselor, but who else within a school system, or even maybe outside the school system, but relatable to the school system or the kid in some way, who are good allies for counselors, whether they're the school counselors or the friends, the family counselors working with these kids?
I can jump in. I would say most everyone on the school campus would be a good ally, from the front office staff who takes attendance. A lot of children who are experiencing domestic violence, their attendance suffers, or noticing that they're coming in late in the morning is a big, for me, it's typically a big red flag, because again, a lot of students who end up in my office, a lot of the times they'll be complaining about they didn't sleep well last night or something like that. And usually I've found 9 times out of 10, it's because, kind of after digging some, it's because they'll say, mom and dad were fighting last night or something like that. And so anywhere from front office staff to, of course, the school nurse paying attention to marks on the body or anything like that. Again, if they're coming to the nurse a lot with an upset stomach or a headache, things like that. Teachers, of course, building those relationships with students, so that students feel safe to talk with them, or and then of course school counselors, and then after school staff even. We have a program on our campus called ACE, which is for students. It's kind of like a mentor program. So those staff there, daycare staff, really anyone on the school campus.
Thanks, Kara. Are there other allies that folks think about? Kara, I spoke pretty specifically to the school campus. Are there allies outside of that space that you all can think of that are your allies in this work when you are working with a child who's experienced domestic or sexual violence?
For the kids that are attending even the daycare staff, sometimes I will hear from parents that the child has been fighting a lot with the other kids at daycare, or they have been dropping off and picking up time has been very varied. So it might change the entire dynamic, the way the kid may be interacting with the other kids at a daycare. Like Priscilla said, like regression, like the child was fully potty trained, and now there has been multiple accidents throughout the whole week time. What does that look like? So I think the daycare staff would also be a great point of contact that's outside of the school.
And I know too, not necessarily folks that you might, as the therapist, be in contact with, but certainly people you could recommend for your client, your child clients, to have almost like in their safety network would be other safe adults in their families. So uncles or aunts, or, older, like teenage and older siblings, that sort of thing. Those folks can always be part of their safety network. And know what's going on. One of the things we believe about kids experiencing domestic and sexual violence is that we want them to tell someone and just keep telling until it can stop, right? And so that's part of the trauma, is that a lot of times these things are so secretive and so unknown, and these kids are just holding this stuff and not sharing. And maybe you all as the therapist are some of the first people, or sometimes it's the teacher, as Kara and Anita mentioned, it's the teacher that they tell first, and then the teacher comes to you as the school counselor like, happy. And so I think those are teachers can totally be in a child safety network and what that looks like and means. Kara and Anita, as people who work in schools, is it helpful to hear from agency, like outside therapists, when something might be going on for a kid that may show up or come out at school? Do you want to know that in advance?
100%. Yes, it is so helpful because sometimes with the hustle and bustle of school and all the things that are going on in just one day, it's helpful to know that like what that child's team looks like, if it's an expanded team. And so if they're going to counseling, that's absolutely somebody that can be part of that child's success at school. And so if we can expand that team in and kind of all be on the same page and even have the student understand that we're a team and it's not just because we're at school and they're outside of school, like we work together to make sure, you know, you're good and we can meet all your personal goals you're wanting to meet. It's relieving for that child and it's also very helpful for all the adults involved.
Yes, I totally agree. Having all of the information from professional counselors or doctors or anyone that's involved closely with the child and the family is so helpful for us, just so we know, you know, when a child is coming to school and they are having meltdowns or they are having behavioral things going on in the classroom, even just letting the teacher know, hey, so, you know, something's going on with this child. That teacher, most teachers are usually very empathetic to those things, and they will work with the child how we're kind of asking them to work with the child.
I'm so glad you brought up the medical professional piece of that too, because these things are often very likely something that may come up at a pediatrician's office before you know, a Priscilla or a Paula V is involved with what's going on for them. So very glad you brought that up. Thank you. I hadn't even thought about asking that or including those folks in the safety network. I know I have some other kind of specific questions to school related things, but one thing I just thought might help listeners is, you know, Priscilla and Paula V, in your roles at Friends of the Family with the younger kids, a lot of what you do is play therapy. Can y'all explain what play therapy is to our listeners? And then Anita and Kara, once they've done that, I'd like y'all to talk about how your role at school might be different than like a play therapist at Friends of the Family.
So we provide play therapy for the young kids about 3 and up, I would say about 9 or so, and then activity therapy for the older kids. Just to kind of say, people ask me what my work is. I play with the kids. Absolutely, that's my work. That's my favorite part. The kids, because the we do play therapy, play is their language. You would not see a 3-year-old coming to you and talking to you about how fearful they were last night when the dad and mom was fighting, how scary it was when the police came and then took one of their parents. So because they don't have that vocabulary at that age, so they would be expressing a lot through play. The room behind me that you see is an actual play therapy room in our transition housing office. So we have different toys in the room, we have sandbox, we have bot bag. So basically we're tracking the play. We're reflecting the feeling. We also set some of the limits. So what I also do over here is provide a parent orientation. In that parent orientation, it's basically a quick rundown of CPRT, but in basically 2 weeks. Over there at that time, I also let the parents know what play therapy is, what activity therapy is. I show them our play therapy room. So the young child will come to our room and then we provide the services in person, tracking their play, reflecting their feelings, setting a limit if it's absolutely needed, those kind of stuff.
Are there specific toys that are picked out to be in a playroom, or is it just like any toy in the store?
There's a lot of like research and things about what toys are put into a playroom, and they've done a lot of great stuff at UNT actually about that. But there's toys that, so one of the things that we are doing in the playroom is looking for themes, and so different toys fall into different categories of themes. So examples might be like power and control, or anxiety, belonging, relationships. So the way children interact with toys can kind of tell us about what themes they're presenting. And like Polly was saying, that's their language. That's how they're processing what they've experienced. And they are meeting their needs because they know what their needs are. It's just they're playing out those needs.
Pallavi, I think you said the initials CPRT, and Priscilla may have mentioned that a little bit earlier. Are there different play therapy approaches? And which one do you all use?
We use the child-centered play therapy. So our approach is not very directive, it's very indirective. We are following the child's lead. So we use the child-centered play therapy at Denton County Friends of the Family.
And to answer your question, so child-parent relationship therapy, that's just some people use it as the main approach, but it's also another thing that we sort of incorporate in our parent consultation process of giving parents skills to basically just enhance and focus on that relationship between child and parent, because it's, again, relationships are so important to kiddos, and especially relationships outside of the home too. So all of those great teachers and counselors they have at school are great people too.
Awesome. So Kara and Anita, does y'all's role, I mean, I have known you both as play therapists at Friends of the Family once upon a time, but does y'all's role now look different than like a full-blown play therapy session? And can you speak to how?
I can, do you want, I can go. Yes, my role in the schools is different. So I am what's called a student assistance counselor. And so that's different than, we do have the professional school counselor here on campus. The professional school counselor at the elementary level does guidance. They go into the classroom and teach, social skills and things like that. But they are also available to talk to students if a student needs to talk. My role on campus is a little more specific to dealing with crisis situations. So I see kiddos throughout the day, like for lunch groups and things like that. And also attend to any kiddo who might be going through a crisis, like at home or at school. So suicide assessments, DV screenings, things like that. That would be my role on campus. So it's not like Pallavi or Priscilla who would see a child probably over 6 months to do intensive therapy with that child once a week. I probably see a child once a week for maybe 6 weeks. And that's a child that maybe is very high needs. And so what I'm able to provide at the school setting is coping skills for while they're at school, to, as they're sitting in the classroom, what things will help them. Maybe sometimes they just need to come to my office to have a cool down, or they need to process something. But my role here on campus is not so much of the deep therapy, the processing. It's more solution focused. How do we make school a safe place for you? How to, it's just kind of specific to here at school. And then also reaching out to parents to provide them resources. So like Denton County Friends of the Family, or the CAC, or drawing a blank, food pantries or things like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara. Anita, does yours look different working with a different age group?
It's very, very similar to what Kara just explained. It just looks different because our kids are older, and so our meltdowns are more like aggression or maybe fighting with a peer. And so they just look different. But I definitely see a lot of themes still. And so, yeah, we don't do therapy here. It is solution focused. How do we support you so that you can be successful today? What do you need so that you can be successful today? Sometimes that's just venting and talking to somebody. Sometimes that's just sitting quietly for 10 minutes because we're overwhelmed. And so it just looks different for every kid. And really that's kind of what I tell them. Even I tell all the adults and all the students that I meet that's my job. That's my only role, is to support you today and from here on out. And how do we come up with ideas that will be helpful? Also, a big part of my job is going to the teams that work with the students that are in need of support, and helping them come up with ideas to support the students within their classroom. Because I said earlier that we have 8 transitions in the day, 8 periods in the day that they go to back and forth from different classrooms, different teachers, different students, in each one. And so sometimes they might be presenting really well in math, but then in English, they might be a whole different child. You just never know. And so my job a lot of the time is to go into the classrooms and just support teachers, maybe create an opportunity for relationship building, so that they can find some safety throughout the day as well.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that as well. Building those relationships with the child's teacher is so important, because we can develop a plan for that student in the classroom, whether that be, when they're having a bad day, or, or they are having a meltdown. Do we have a cool down spot in the classroom for that child, with things that they can decompress with? Do they need to come sit in the counselor's office for 10 minutes? But the teachers are so important in that process of supporting kids on campus.
I'm finding that it's difficult to do a panel with 4 therapists because you all keep reading my mind about what my next question is. So my next question was, how can teachers help? And maybe I know you just told me like some of that, but can you expand on that? For folks listening, whether they be administrators or teachers or parents who are maybe wanting their child's teachers to help, what can teachers do better to assist you all in your roles, not just Anita and Kara, but also, Pallavi and Priscilla, and very specifically, what can they do to help these kids?
I'm going to come back again to that relationship. So being exposed to violence, whether it be domestic violence or sexual violence, is what we call an adverse childhood experience. And one of the biggest protective factors is having a relationship with a caring adult, like outside of the family. So just by being caring and supportive to kiddos, that's doing so much to them. And again, they're providing a predictable and safe environment where there's no violence. They know what the expectations are. They know probably that they can go to their teacher if they need help because they're predictable and they're safe and they're loving. So teachers are already doing so many things that are wonderful.
Totally agreeing with Priscilla in regard to, because kids with either they're primary victim of domestic violence or sexual assault, or even they're the secondary victim, all they're looking is for that nurturing, that support, and that safer environment. It can be just one safer adult that can change their life, which means in a safer way. For me, like maybe I might see a child in a therapy session for about 45 to 50 minutes once a week. But first kids, I feel like with school age kids, they are with the teacher, first homeschool teacher, they are there for the most amount of time. So if maybe teachers see some of the behaviors that they feel as a red flag, talk to the counselors out there or the school nurse. In the parent-teacher meeting might be the best time to talk about this. Or are the kids receiving services elsewhere, like maybe in our agency? How can we provide that support to the teacher so that the teacher can provide that safer environment to the kid itself? So if you say something, and then I think what child is looking at that time is the stability and predictability. Me as an adult, I tend to be anxious if I don't know what's happening, and then I can only imagine how kids might feel, especially the world are changing so much. And as I can totally see in the school setting, if they're targeted as a bad kid, targeting every single time. I think teacher can definitely reach out to any of us and then say what's going on so we can provide that support.
Y'all both just nailed it. I don't know, y'all explained it so beautifully. And I think, I've always known this, but I think it's been really solidified for me this year and last year too, that, teachers don't go into teaching to teach English or math. Like they go into teaching to make a difference in students and create, lifelong adults and students with great things to add to the world. And so I've learned that it really is, kids just need a listening ear. They just need to be seen. And teachers do that every day. Teachers compliment students. Hey, I really like your hair today. It looks different. Or even just saying hi in the hallway. Maybe they haven't felt seen all day and somebody finally does that. And usually that's a teacher. And it sounds little, but for students and children that have gone through so much, gone through things that nobody should ever experience, that means a lot. And so sometimes, I've had teachers with questions about like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, but that's okay. Like, that's not really necessary. It's what you're doing already. Your concern, your love, your care for that student, just looking at them makes their day. So that's been really inspiring. And teachers already have so much to do and so much on their plate, but that is probably the most important thing that they do.
Absolutely. Again, you've all said the relationship is the most important piece, and I'll echo that. Kids they won't remember every lesson plan that a teacher created, but they will remember how a teacher made them feel. And if a teacher can make a kiddo feel safe, that is probably, if they do have domestic violence or sexual abuse going on at home, school is probably the only place they do feel safe. And if a teacher can create that safe relationship at school, it's just so powerful for that student.
I think probably each of us on the call can immediately, bring to mind a teacher who impacted our lives by making us feel seen or heard for some various reason or another. And I also, that stability that Paula V mentioned, kids are actually often spending more time with their teachers than they spend waking hours with their own family. And so these are some of the people with the most amount of influence to really build up or tear down a child. What other school staff, administration, nurses, aides, there are lots of other folks in the school building. What can those people do to help that might look different from what a teacher would do?
We have the opportunity to have a student resource officer on campus, and that's really helpful. It's a police officer through Denton PD, but they work here every day, and they're student resource. And so they're the one that's here always like make sure that's the first thing that they say to a student. I'm here for you. I'm your student resource. And so they have the eyes, through the legal realm, but even then those are eyes that are that can make such a big difference alongside everybody else. And so we're really thankful that we have that, because the students really do utilize her.
Hillary, you mentioned admin, so principals, assistant principals, that sort of thing. I think they are also very essential. Oftentimes they can advocate for students, with teachers or with other school personnel, or even outside of the school they can. And so they also play a very big role.
I would also say the main campus, for example, like social worker, counseling services, the department. Whenever I enroll the kids that we have at our shelter transition housing program, I think that I've worked closely with like Barb Hafley, that's the social work at Denton ISD, and Daisy Romero. They always try to provide that the kids have everything when the first day they start the school. So there's not we're talking about like free lunches, we're talking about transportation, we're talking about backpacks and everything. So I feel like even getting those staff on board is so helpful. We're just removing one barrier that is maybe stop a child from not attending a day of the school because of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Anita said it earlier, but I think just learning someone's name, saying hello, that kind of helps someone feel like they belong. And you never know like what someone's going through, and just that little thing can make such a big difference. And definitely there are lots of kiddos in school, so it's probably impossible to learn every single name, but just that attitude of welcoming, I think that goes a long way, and that's something everyone can do.
And I will always, as the director of training, make this shameless plug, but for school administrators or teachers who want to learn more about domestic and sexual violence, I'm your person. That's my whole job, is to teach people more about those things. And so if you are wanting, training during an in-service time, I know the August ones have already passed, but as you're getting ready to come back from the winter break and you need to fill a day or a half a day, please don't hesitate to reach out to us about those things. We've had a question come in, y'all, from some of the folks watching. I think it can be for anyone, and it may actually have shown up differently for Paula V and Priscilla than Anita and Kara, but it says, what observations regarding children in domestic violence homes during the pandemic did you all see or have?
So I will say during the pandemic, when we were all doing online learning and connected learning, a lot of the red flags we would notice with students was not attending class, just or showing up to class late, and things like that. But mostly it was the attendance, just not showing up. And so that was very concerning to a lot of teachers, and many teachers came to me with concerns about their students.
There was really that idea for both child and adult victims of us doing this work, really knowing in so many ways that they're trapped physically in a space that normally they would be at least getting some relief and reprieve from by going to school or going to work, that those things were not happening, especially during the time of lockdown. Which also makes it obviously much more difficult to reach out for help or to tell someone what's happening. Just being cognizant of y'all's time and our viewers' time, I don't see any other questions that have come through as folks are watching, but if there was one nugget of information that you all could each leave with our listeners, what would that be? One takeaway. I put you on pop quiz live. Love it. But the four of you are like, I'm not the one.
I'll go. The first thing that came to my mind is just understanding that like the child is human first. And they go through things that there's no book about that says like, hey, if this happens to you, like this is what you should do to fix it or to get better or to feel better. That doesn't exist for students or adults even. And so I'm thankful specifically in the school that academics are important, but the person is priority. Academics will fall into place. Everything else will fall into place as long as we got our student supported and getting them all that they need for at least just the day. And then tomorrow we'll figure it out. But
I think for me is just for anyone to never underestimate the impact that you could have upon a child. So just like we were saying, that relationship building piece, just being that safe person for that child just could absolutely change everything for them. And so never underestimate that.
Kara, you took the portion that I was about to say. I just wanted for everyone watching, anyone, teachers, like parents, anybody, you can be that one safer individual for the child. It doesn't have to be a child, but any child. You can be that safer individual, that the child feel that this is a safer person that I can go to, and accepting the child the way they are. As Anita mentioned, like they are an individual first and everything will fall into a place. A child can grow and flourish. They're like the flowers, they're gonna bloom when you give that, like that love, that care, that acceptance on a consistent basis.
Very similarly to what all of them have said, I think, I think Kara mentioned it earlier, we might not always remember what someone does or says to us, but we remember how they made us feel. And just leading with compassion. I think I love what they said about that kids are human too. They're experiencing real things, and sometimes there might be disruptions and that can be frustrating, but they're a person. And I think everyone is just doing the best they can. And I think, again, just, fostering those relationships.
Well, I am once again so appreciative to you four, Anita, Kara, Pallavi, and Priscilla, for joining me. I love seeing your faces. I love hearing your voices and your expertise. And I think, for school administrators and teachers and nurses and staff, lead with empathy. Lead with empathy and go into that space knowing that you don't know exactly what each child is experiencing when they leave your doors, and that they need you. They need you to be the stability. They need you to be the rock, and they need you to lead with empathy. I appreciate all of you for being on our webinar. And so we will sign off and say goodbye to Facebook for our live August community conversation. Thanks again.